So a few months ago, I posted a fall TBR, and I thought that now, since it's December and I'm counting this as winter, I thought it would be good to look back and see if I read the books that I said I was going to read and see how I did with that. So this is my TBR catch-up video. So in my video, I said that I wanted to read 10 books. That's not 10, that's 6 or 51. So I said I wanted to read 10 books, and I kind of broke them down into two categories, one of them being just books I had on my TBR that I wanted to get to, and one of them being specifically fall vibe type of books. Books I thought I would get the most out of if I read them in the fall times. The first book I put on that list was The Word for Woman is Wilderness by Abby Andrews, and I read it. Check. This is ultimately not my favorite, but I'm glad that I read it. And I feel like having it on the list really did encourage me to read it, so that's good. The next book, this is in no order whatsoever, but the next book in that category is The Overstory by Richard Powers, another book that I read. It was pretty okay. It did put me in a big reading slump. The next book, I don't really want to get it down. The next book in the book of things, the next book in the list of things I just wanted to get to is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I loved it. I read it. It was great. Check. And then the last one in that category is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I have not read this yet, but my friend and I are talking about reading it together. That's why I haven't read it. And so yes, that's my excuse, because I would rather read it with her if we can, or if we want to. I'll read it. I'll read it. I'll read it at some point, but I do not feel... Oh, I have a bookmark. That's fun. I do not feel bad that I haven't gotten to this yet. So I don't feel like I failed. I just consciously decide not to do it. The next category, like I said, was books that kind of give me fall vibes. The first book I had in there was Her Body and Other Stories. Nope, I always say that. Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I read this and I loved it. So, yay. And this super do recommend reading this one in fall. That it can really match the Halloween-y vibes. So if you can read it in October. And I added another one, and I even read another Carmen Maria Machado book. And when I was making the video, I was kind of going between which of her books I wanted to put on my list, and I decided to go for the more spooky one. But I feel like I should get an extra point for reading two of her books that I was like, ignore the noise, but two books that I had interest in reading. The next book on the list was Misery by Stephen King. I read it. I don't know, this one didn't give me super intense fall vibes. I think the original Crash happened in winter because it was snowing. I don't know, just in general, this one didn't really give me fall vibes. But I read it Stephen King. The next book on my list was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and yes, I did read this. I had a good time with it. I loved the gothic feel of this book, so that was a good choice. It's very Christmassy in my, the red nails and the red poinsettia. I'm here for that vibe too. The next book I wanted to read was a thriller. In my video, I specifically mentioned One by One by Ruth Ware. I did not read that. I ended up picking up Lock Every Door by Ruth Ware. And I also read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So again, I said I wanted to read a thriller, and I ended up reading two. Wow. I feel like, look at me go. The next book I wanted to read was October Country by Ray Bradbury. And this one I did not finish. I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it because I really feel like I'll get more out of it if I read it, so I can have all of the illustrations. So if we look at all of my list, I said I wanted to read 10 books, and I read 8. But if we add those 2 extras, I did read 10. One of them that I didn't read, I have a good reason behind. I feel confident about it. This one, I really wish I'd gotten to it, but again, I would rather give myself a situation where I'll enjoy it the most. So I'll just wait till next October. So we adjusted the frame a little bit. I feel like I did a very good job with my TBR. I've never set out and made a TBR like that before. I don't know, I just kind of pick up what I want to read and read it. What a concept. So it was interesting to do that. It was interesting because I definitely read the books because I said that I was going to read them, and then I felt obligated to do it. There's 2 instances where I feel like that kind of bit me. This one I just didn't love, but I forced my way through it. This one put me in a reading slump. And if you watched the October wrap-up, I kind of talked about it a bit more, where I kept pushing myself through it. I wanted to read it and get it done for the video, and then I just really struggled with picking up things after that. But also I kind of feel like that was just like the mood I was in October, so I don't really want to, I don't know, like how much can I blame this specific book versus just what was happening at the time, I suppose. So, but in the long run, I'm very happy that I read both of these and they're off my TBR. Like, I feel pressure with certain books that sit there for a while. Just like looking at my bookshelf, there's so many that I see that I'm like, oh, I just really wish I could just get it over with and having and say that I've read it, because I don't know. So I'm glad that I've read them and they're not just staring at me anymore, but also, was it worth it to force my way through it? I don't know. I think it was, but something to think about. I've discussed my feelings on TBRs, and I don't really know how I feel about them yet. I think that they're good because they can really, you know, there's certain things I want to have read. It's like a good way to get myself to read it, but then also kind of like hurt me in the long run. So I am going to do a winter TBR, but this time I'm going to give myself choices. What a concept. So now for each of like the kind of categories, I'm going to give myself 2 books I can choose from. Or, you know, I can choose none of them. It's not really how my brain works. I like to like check all the boxes, but it'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. If I choose not to read them, I choose not to read them. But hopefully the choices will help me out. And the first category is Christmas books. So, since it's the festive season, I would like to read at least one. Christmas Stories by Charles Dickens and My True Love Gave to Me, edited by Stephanie Perkins. I just bought this. This one's the one I really want to get to, but because it's a classic, I'm not putting the pressure on myself. If I'm not in the mood, I'm not in the mood. I do love the illustrations in it. Like, oh, and just the cover of this. So I really would like to do this one. But this is also fun. I've read this quite a few times since I got it when it came out. Oh, it's an old Christmas card. This is our Christmas card from 2018. Look at Dobers. Look at us. This was a good card. Wow. That's cute. Cute. Okay. So I have that in there. So I got this. I read this first when it first came out. And since then, I don't know if I've read it every year, but I've read it quite a few, or I'll like get a certain way in. I have 2 bookmarks in it. I don't know why I have 2. Anyway. There are stories in here that I really like. There's some that I really don't love. But I think it'd be fun just to like, ideally, I read both of these. But again, I'm giving myself choices. So if I'm like reading this one and not having a great time, I won't force myself to finish it, and I'll pick up this one that I know that I'll count it if I just read my favorite ones. Okay, so the next choice I'm giving myself is I would like to read a classic. And for this one, I kind of picked 2 random ones. So I've only read 2 Jane Austen books. I've read Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey. I did not read this edition. I actually read, can I do this? I read Up There is a Bind Up. I think it's that one. So I read one of those. I've only read 2, and she has a few, and I have quite a few of hers. I have most of hers. I'm missing 1, I think. I would like to read another Jane Austen book. I just grabbed Sense and Sensibility. I also, in this edition, have Emma, and then I have a Penguin Classics edition of Mansfield Park, and then, like I said, I have the whole bind-up, so I have lots of opportunity to do it. So I'd like to read maybe a Jane Austen, or Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I love this edition. And this one I know has some like really good winter vibes, so that would be good. I technically have this marked as read on Goodreads, but I didn't really read it. So I would like to read a classic. And again, it doesn't have to be either of these 2. or, you know, Jane Austen or this one. I have lots at my disposal, but it definitely needs to be one that I own, because I would like to limit the amount of unread books on my shelves. The next option I'm giving myself is a poetry collection, and the two that I have to choose from are Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman and Devotions by Mary Oliver. This is very big. I have heard very good things about both of these. This one I stole from my mom's bedside table, and this one I've had because it's one of my, drop caps Penguin collectible editions. I recently heard really good things about this one, and I would like to read it. My idea was that I would have it by my bedside table, and before I went to bed I would read some, and I'd be like, I'm just gonna read a few poems, and then I'd make my way through it. So I started out with this one, but I think my issue is it's not difficult, but it's not something that I feel like I have to really pay attention to get the most out of it. So who knows about this one. And this one I haven't started yet. I haven't tried. Maybe these would be a better choice to read before I went to bed. Maybe it's a little bit more easy to get through. But yeah, one of these. It has to be one of these because I don't have any other poetry collections. I don't think that I haven't read. I think I've read them all. The next two are, I didn't want to take them off my shelf because they were behind my head, and I wanted the aesthetic of having a full bookshelf. So the next two that I have to choose from are The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson and The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. These are so gigantic. I have read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and I really enjoyed them, and I've heard really good things about The Way of Kings. I think there's 5 books in this series and 4 of them are out, something like that. I've had this for a few years and I would just like to dig into it. I've heard really good things, and I think I would like it. The second option is Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I have read this and I loved it so much that I wanted to get this fancy, is it the 10th? Yeah, the 10th anniversary. That took me too long to find. So I love this enough I want to get this 10th anniversary edition. I want to reread this. I read this in 2016, so it's been a while, so I would like to go back to it. And I also haven't read this edition. I read this on a plane and while we were traveling in 2016 to Prague, which was a great trip. And so I have really fond memories of that trip, and then also while I was there I was reading this. I thought that's really fun that I had that tie-in. But so I read that on Kindle and I decided to buy this edition later on, and it has some full page illustrations and things like that. So I want to read this because I have fond memories and I don't remember a lot of it, so I'd like to read it. And also I have the sequel that got eaten up in the mail. Look at this. One of these 2 fantasy behemoth books I would like to read this winter. So the next category I have is nonfiction, specifically some books on race in America. So I'd like to read at least one. I have read quite a bit this year, and I've read most of what I own. And the last 2 I have left are Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall and White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. I have had this one for a bit, but this one I just got about a month ago. So for these, I'm not really giving myself the option of reading one, since this is a season-long TBR. I would love to read both of these by what would it be? March? Absolutely. These need to be read by then. But I'll give myself leeway, and I need to at least read one. They're both short. This one's very short. This one I'm super excited about. I've heard amazing things about this. I'm really excited to pick this one up. This one I've heard controversial things about, which I've talked about. I don't know, this one just doesn't appeal to me as much, but should be read. So yes, these are the next 2 that I want to read. Okay, that's it. That is my checking in on how I did in fall, which I feel like I did very well, and a little bit of a discussion of TBRs and a winter TBR. There we go. We did it. Wow. I'm excited about winter reading. I think this will be a really good option for me in winter, is giving myself options instead of just being strict on exactly what books, is kind of like a theme and then giving myself a few options. I think that's good. And again, it's just reading, you know? It's very low stakes. So if I read it, if I don't, I don't. I just think it can be helpful to have a little bit of a plan for when I finish a book. I'm just sitting there like twiddling my thumbs and saying like, well, I did it, now what? So now I can be like, I do have a plan for what else to read. Pick up one of these things. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! I want that to be like an aesthetic, like match lighting shot, and instead the match just decided to go a little crazy. God, I used to love, when I was used to, obviously I still do it, but I used to love like swirling the smoke around after I lit a candle. I feel like there's a lot of smoke this time though. That was back when I like watched After the Last Airbender a little too much, and I was convinced I could control the elements. Like, a little actually convinced. Not like in a fun, like, oh, I'm playing, like, I really thought so. Oh, I would lay at the bottom. I would, like, lay at the bottom of, like, the ocean. It wasn't that deep, but I would, like, lay down, or, like, hover there, and I would, like, go like this, and I would see the sand swirling, and I was like, I'm doing that! Like, yeah, I'm moving the water, water's moving the sand. That's the kind of kid I was, and still am.